first, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Nibley. This is Fox 12 Now. Taking a look there at our live shot. I just wanted to pull that up. That is at the Oregon coast there at our Chinook Winds camera in Lincoln City. It looks pretty beautiful out there. So there's somebody out there taking a walk on the beach. But I am glad also that you're all here with us right now. So this is Fox 12 Now. We live stream here every weekday starting at 1 p.m., going throughout the afternoon, bringing you segments and content and discussions about a broad range of things. Today, right now, we're going to be talking about the return of grizzly bears to the Northwest, in particular, the North Cascades National Park. But this is part of a reintroduction plan that's been in the works for quite a long time. We're going to go over some of the details of about that and try to understand that just a little bit more. And to do so, very thankful to have with us right now Joe Scott from Conservation Northwest. And Joe, really appreciate your time in being here. I know this has been in the works for a while. This is an exciting development. But to start off, would you mind just telling us a little bit about Conservation Northwest and what you do?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Greg. I appreciate it. We are a regional conservation NGO. We're a non-governmental organization. We've been around for about 30 years. We focus on protecting, connecting wild habitats and restoring native species to those habitats.
And in the time that there's a lot of species, but aside from the grizzly bears that we're going to get into, what are some of the species maybe that people may be familiar with that you've worked on as far as reintroducing or maintaining their habitat here in the Northwest?
Oh, gray wolves, wolverines, Pacific fishers. We pretty much have most of it restored to a certain extent in the North Cascades. So it's an exciting time. And most of these animals have come back on their own. We've not, aside from fishers, we've not had an active restoration program for any of these animals. They've just managed to find our way back here.
That's great. And that's good for the environment, good for the ecosystem, to have these back there. And when we talk about, grizzly bears, I guess just to give the very basic concept here, as far as brown bears or grizzly bears in general, are there any currently in the Northwest, if we count it as Washington, Oregon, Idaho, right now?
Yeah, the bulk of grizzly bear populations are in Montana and Wyoming. So those being found in our flagship parks in those areas, so Yellowstone ecosystem and Northern Continental Divide. We do have small numbers in Idaho, and a lot of people also don't realize we actually have grizzly bears in Washington state as well. And those are found in the northeastern part of Washington in the Selkirk Mountains. So, that population is growing there, and it's shared between British Columbia and Washington. It's the Selkirk Habitat Yak grizzly bears, they've been more or less referred to. And they're also a small population and sort of struggling, but definitely starting to recover to some extent.
And that's that northeast corner. And then when we talk to the western side of Washington State, has there been any instances of grizzly bears coming down from BC, or are there any currently in that western side of British Columbia on the border there?
No, and that's the issue. We have photographic evidence of a couple of male grizzly bears on the BC side of the border in Manning Provincial Park. We have no documented evidence of females or any reproduction in the system, and that's what's encouraged this process to happen. We don't have the capacity to grow this population from nothing, and there isn't any documented evidence that bears can get here on their own. So those couple of males are probably the only males that have been there for a while, and we haven't seen any in Washington now documented evidence of those since 1996.
Okay, so it's been a while since we've seen anything there, and for this reintroduction process, I guess let's start off with how that would happen. So without an existing population, or the possibility, likely anyway, of a population coming down from Canada into there and naturally being there, what is the process of reintroducing grizzly bears to that area of Washington State?
Yeah, generally speaking, federal wildlife biologists would trap or try to trap bears, most likely prioritizing Northwest Montana as a source population. So, Northern Continental Divide is probably upwards of 11 or 1,200 bears in that system. From what I understand, that would be the priority for sourcing bears for the North Cascades, mostly because they have a similar, what would be called a similar food environment that we have in the North Cascades. So the foods that grizzly bears find in those places, like the Northern Continental Divide, are similar to the foods we have here in the North Cascades, mostly plant-based, right?
And
So,
yeah, right. Similar territory.
Similar territory. So since bears are behavioral learners, they learn from their moms. If federal biologists move those bears from that area to here, they would find the foods here pretty similar, if not identical, to what they know and what they're used to in northern Montana or even Yellowstone, for example. So easiest way of explaining that is these wouldn't be salmon bears, right? They wouldn't be bears that are used to feeding on salmon like you would find in the British Columbia coast or Alaska. These would be interior bears that have no history of or familiarity with salmon. They would not be management bears, so they wouldn't be bears that have had any contact with human beings or conflict with human beings. They'd be wild animals that come from a similar food economy that we have here in the North Cascades.
So I think that's interesting too to highlight that yeah, not salmon eating bears, so they're not used to that. They're not going to be down by the river around fishermen, most likely.
Exactly.
Yeah. And looking at the reintroduction plan, what are some of the benefits that this would provide to that region, specifically for the environment and for that ecosystem there?
Sure, and that's a great question, Greg, and it's one we hear all the time. Grizzly bears are a native species to the Pacific Northwest, and so they evolved with the system. The system has evolved with these animals, and since grizzly bears use a wide variety of habitats and elevations from valley bottoms in springtime to subalpine and alpine environments in fall, their impacts are felt throughout the ecosystem. They're prolific diggers. That's why they have a hump and claws. Those are adaptations for digging. They're not adaptations for aggressive behavior. Those are muscles and tools that they need to dig, since they find a lot of their foods in the form of roots and insects and those kinds of things. So the benefit of that, of course, is that they aerate soils, they spread the seeds of the plants and the fruits that they eat, and they generally have impacts that aren't generally done by other animals, even black bears. They fill a niche that is fairly unique, I would say.
And go ahead, continue.
Yeah, and they also tear logs apart to feed on insects, for example, ants and ant larvae. Some bears become very skilled at digging out marmots and ground squirrels. So again, they're aerating soils and having an impact on those localized ecosystems. So their meat eating mostly consists of small mammals and insects, with the occasional predation on ungulate calves, for example. So some bears become pretty skilled at finding ungulates, especially when they're calving, but they're generally not very good hunters, and that's why they have to hibernate in the wintertime. They can't find the foods that they need to stay awake. So yeah, those are largely the impacts we see from bears in these systems.
And would there be, for anybody out there who, obviously when you say introducing grizzly bears, if people are unfamiliar, they could be, there's a little bit of that fear factor as well. So when it comes to that, I guess before we get to the human side, are there any negative impacts that can happen on the environment up there by reintroducing bears, or something that we should be expecting to hear about or see?
No, I can't. Well, I can't imagine and I can't articulate any negative impacts of a native animal. They evolved in these areas. They belong here. They lived here for thousands of years. And so they're not like an invasive species, which we see in a lot of these places where they have profound negative impacts on ecosystems. Bears can only have positive impacts. If you talk about negative impacts from a fear standpoint of human beings, that's a whole nother story.
I guess
Completely.
Yeah, and I guess that is something for people out there who, go hiking and camping in these areas. Is there anything that they'll have to change or be concerned with once a bear population is reintroduced into that area?
Yes, and this is probably the biggest question most people have. And I'll answer it this way. We have upwards of 2,000 to 2,500 bears in some of the most popular recreational meccas in the Rocky Mountains. Again, Yellowstone and Northern Continental Divide ecosystems. We have upwards of 5 or 6 million visitor youth days in Yellowstone Park and in local environments. Similar numbers in Northern Continental Divide, which encompasses the Glacier National Park and associated ecosystems and national forests, and very few conflicts between grizzly bears and human beings. Bears go about their business, human beings go about their business, and if people are observant, if they follow the guidelines that should be followed when you're in bear country, and this is the same for black bears as well, which means proper food storage, making noise on trails so you don't surprise animals, hiking in groups, carrying bear spray, generally being aware of your environment. Coexistence is a reality. We can live with these animals. We do it in all these other places successfully. And I think, the positive aspects of experiencing grizzly bears in the wild country greatly exceed, and certainly in most people's minds are how would I say it? Much more compelling than the possibility of any negative impacts. Hold on, I got a train coming by.
Oh, no worries.
Close the window here.
Okay, gotcha.
So yeah, there. Some people are afraid, but preparation can, preparation can certainly assuage those fears. I think in most people, and again, we see this in other places. It works well. It just requires preparation, some generosity of spirit, and the understanding of these animals and how they work and how we should conduct ourselves in these places.
When it comes to the next steps here of reintroducing them into the system, so going back to that, it was most likely going to be some population or some bears from northern Montana or somewhere in that area, just because they will have the similar habitat. How long would it take to, I guess, how many bears are going to be introduced first, and how long will it take to establish them as their own population there?
Yeah, I mean, as long as this process has been going on, it's going to be many times longer to actually get to the point where we have a self-sustaining population here. And the plan, I believe, is to move around 25 bears over 7 to 10 years into the North Cascades. That would essentially look like 3 to 5 bears a year. It's expected that some of those bears will die. Some of those bears will try to go home.
Sorry, I think I cut out there just for a second.
Yeah, that's because I'm trying to hear myself over the background noise. So.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay.
That's all right. Yeah, that's on our end. For everybody who's watching, this is live, and I'm in the newsroom, so there's a bunch of things happening behind me there. Yeah. So
anyway,
it'll yeah.
it'll take 50 to 100 years to get to the population objectives that the agencies have set out, which I believe is around 200 animals.
200 animals in 50 to 100 years, but still,
Yeah.
reintroducing them in and then, establishing that population. As you mentioned, it's where they traditionally were for thousands and thousands of years. So bringing them back there is largely going to be beneficial, it sounds like, for the environment and the ecosystem in general, and reestablishing that area there. And, I think it's a fascinating to see it. Beyond the bears, for Conservation Northwest, are there any other animals, just as we wrap up here, that you are looking for reintroduction of?
No, this is the grizzly bears have been the redheaded stepchild of the North Cascades in terms of recovery. So now I think, the others seem to be doing well, coming back on their own and growing their populations of aforementioned animals. And it's just the grizzly bears that are outstanding. So we're looking forward to this. It's an exciting time, certainly an exciting opportunity. And I think, it's something that we can be proud of in the Pacific Northwest, because we've managed to protect and steward this environment to the extent that it can accommodate a self-sustaining population of bears. And that's a big deal here.
That's great. Well,
Cool.
Joe, for everybody else out there who wants to learn more about what you do and how to even, maybe get involved, what's the best place for them to go to learn more about Conservation Northwest?
Go to the website, www.conservationnw.org.
Great. Well, Joe, thank you. Anything that I missed that you think people should know about?
The North Cascades is a rich, productive, suitable habitat for grizzly bears. It's very wild, is very well protected. Most of it is in parks and wilderness and national forests, and eminently suitable for grizzly bears and wild habitats. There you go.
Perfect. Joe, thank you very much for joining us. I really, really appreciate your time to talk about this. Exciting congratulations too on just, everything that you've worked on and that Conservation Northwest is doing to help these species along and now, getting grizzly bears back here. So, Joe, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Greg. Thank you.
And for everybody watching too, again, this is Fox 12 Now. Thanks for being a part of the show. We have a wide range of segments you can watch on the Fox 12 Oregon app. I recommend downloading that and on whatever device you're on. That way you can watch not only the other things we have here for Fox 12 Oregon, but also Fox 12 Now. There's a tab there. Of course, we are on the website and Facebook and YouTube as well. So all great places to join along with the conversations and segments that we could have, and good ways to share them as well. But we'll sign off for right now. I'm Greg Dibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.